Burnt flesh. That's my first memory. Not exactly the normal thing a person remembers from their childhood. And even worse, it was my own. Welcome back to Yeah Dude Sick. On today's episode, we take a look into the life of John Buultjens from his book called Ride, BMX Glory Against All the Odds. I'm very excited to be able to share some of his story with you. Now, I'm not going to give you everything, but I'm just going to give you a glimpse into the life of John. I hope you all go buy the book because it's worth it. It's a hell of a story, man. The music you'll hear today is from a man named Jeff Kolar. Man, I'm very fortunate to be friends with this dude. I mean, I haven't seen him for a long time, but I still keep up with him. I used to ride BMX with him when we were younger around the Chicago area. Since then, he's gone on to become an independent sound artist, composer, radio producer, and curator. He's the founder and artistic director of Radius, an experimental broadcast platform established in 2010. The dude's a fucking genius, man. If you haven't heard any of his shit, go check him out on Instagram. It's at Jeff Kolar. Jeff, Jeff, Kolar, Kolar. In his bio, you'll find a link to his Bandcamp profile, which showcases all of his music. Before we start the episode, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Trail Punks. Created in 2012, the intent behind Trail Punks was to provide another zine for the cycling and art communities. But since then, they made all kinds of cool shit, man. And actually just released this dope-ass hat. It's kind of got this like 80s feel to it, you know? And it says Trail Punks, but it's got the backwoods, the backwoods font. So go check that out at Trail Punks Official on Instagram. Hit them up. So what we're doing a little giveaway. They're giving away a stack of goods, and all you got to do is when you hear this podcast, go to the post that I made for it, either on the Shitsonian page or on the Yeah Dude Sick page. And I just want you to answer one question for me. I just want to know, what's your goal this year? You know, with all this shit going on, it's kind of easy to lose focus on ourselves a little bit. Now, I'm not telling you to be selfish, because the stuff going on is very, very important. But let's not lose sight of our own success, you know? So, one goal of mine this year was to create a radio show. Didn't really work, but I think I did the next best thing. I created a podcast, and it seems to be working out all right. So that was my goal. I want to know what your goal is. Let me know what you got. So basically, hit the reply on that. I'm gonna pick one goal from somebody, and I'm gonna throw you this stack of loot, baby. Now I'm just gonna pick a random one. You know, it's not like the best one or whatever, because we all just have our own little goals. So I'm just going to pick one. So do that. Now sit back and listen to the story of John Buultjens. My only real memory is a horrific one. For a long time, I actually wondered if it was all a dream. Well, a nightmare would be more appropriate. I don't remember the pain, but I do remember the smell of burning flesh. God knows what it would have been like. I'm a father myself now, and I can't think of anything worse than seeing my kids suffer like that. But he sat there. He wasn't prepared to wait, so he marched into the kitchen, grabbed the boiling hot frying pan, and splashed some of the bubbling oil across her face. He then used the leverage of the steel pan to snap her arm like a twig. Now, I know I'm jumping around a little bit. I just wanted you to know that. I'm just pulling some snippets from this story early on. And damn. That's some real shit right there, man. You know, you think about memories that you produce in life, and damn, man. You know, I'm a dad too. I got 2 kids, and I try to make it a point to kind of, I don't know, it's like create these memories, these good memories for them. Because you always remember certain shit from being a kid. You remember the good, the bad, you know? So why not try to make every memory good? Continuing on. Sometimes I would jump onto the train into Glasgow city centre to beg for money, and occasionally I'd sleep in the streets. I'd wander around, basically just killing time so I didn't have to be at home. Any minute not spent there was a positive for me. I could never make a case for that bastard. I can't believe my ears when my sister Rachel does. She does it to this day. I've heard her say things like, "He wasn't that bad." What the fuck? Maybe it's because he didn't beat her, as due to some fucked up moral code, he didn't hit my sisters. It wasn't a woman thing, as my mom was regularly knocked about. Yeah, so right now, I'm just trying to paint a picture of, kind of what he endured at such a young age. He was very, very young at this time. As a matter of fact, check this out. I had to scavenge food to satisfy my hunger pains. I was a growing boy after all. So I live up to my nickname and rake through the bins at the Chinese takeout near our house. I remember eating some of the leftovers and looking over to see a dead dog's carcass being devoured by maggots. Even to this day, when I walk past a bin that has a rancid smell, it hits my tongue and causes me to gag. This isn't something a 5-year-old boy should be experiencing. 5 years old, man. Another incident took place when John was 7. And it happened on Christmas Eve, man. I'm not going to tell you the details about that because I think it'd be better if you read that part. But I will say that it led up to John and his sister being removed from their home. So all that shit leading up to this moment, this Christmas Eve. And that was it. John never lived with his parents again. Shortly after that incident, John and his sister were moved to a children's home. It was like prison. Exactly like you see on TV. It was a jungle. Dog eat dog. There was no education going on in there. So we'd be transported to a nearby primary school. I struggled terribly and couldn't read or write. But I never felt embarrassed or ashamed. None of the other pupils said anything to my squad. Why not? Pretty simple. We'd smash their fucking faces in. And then go to work on their bodies, if need be. Life kept on going, and like I've said, I had my gang. I was in my groove. I felt good and comfortable in my environment. And better still, I knew how things operated, and I had a routine. But then in 1982, it was time for things to change. And it wasn't going to be my choice. Yeah, so just to give you another idea of what John has gone through as a kid, it's like bad situation to seemingly bad situation, depending on how you looked at it. John, I think he kind of adapted to this life though, Just given the fact that he had experienced so much so early on. He's kind of in his groove right here. But like he said, things like that, I think they need to come to an end at some point. Eldridge and Mariana Buultjens were a pair of academics. Eldridge was born in Sri Lanka, but came over to Britain to further his education, and he had become a research scientist at the University of Glasgow. Plus, he'd also got a PhD in some sort of complicated biology. The first time I was introduced to them and given some detail about maybe living with them down the line, I was furious. The words in my mind were, "What the fuck?" I said there was no way I was living with any black man. I'd never come across any black people before, and I'd been raised in a culture where racist comments were not only acceptable, but encouraged. I told you, man, this shit's real. John lived with his new parents for about 6 months, but he just couldn't seem to shake those old habits. He got in trouble a bunch of times, and then at one point he just demanded to go back to that children's home. So he contacted a social worker. He didn't put up a fight or try to talk me out of it, his social worker. My stuff was packed into bags, which didn't take long, as practically everything in my room belonged to Eldridge and Mariana anyway. We trudged down to the car, and just as he slipped the key into the ignition, he turned to me and said, "John, if you leave here, you'll be dead by the time you're 16. It was a pretty big thing to say to a youngster, but I could handle it. He went on to tell me he'd never seen a pair of parents offer so much unconditional love and support. They had not flinched about taking on 2 kids, and a rowdy boy at that. They had not buckled when faced with my outrageous behavior and attitude. They had accepted my blatant racism and still wanted me. Colin told me this was my only chance, and that sentence hit me like a lightning bolt. Something right then and there clicked, and I realized it was this: death or prison. The path I was on was so destructive and clearly was just going to get worse. I was a car crash waiting to happen and decided it was time to turn the corner. I told Colin to let me out and I went back into the house. I faced up to Eldridge and Mariana, this couple who had been so fucking nice to me and were offering me a life full of love and opportunities for no other reason other than they wanted to help me. And my little sister, of course. I was in floods of tears as it all came pouring out of me. They were crying too. We'd become a family in that instant. The bond was sealed then. As that happened, Eldridge and Mariana became my mom and dad in my eyes. At this point, it seems like John has a new life. He continues on about, kind of letting his new parents in on his life a little bit. Kind of accepting duties and accepting the fact that he wasn't really in control. I think that was a pretty damn big step for him. Probably. No, I've never met John before, but I'd be surprised if that wasn't the biggest step he made in his life. John then talks about all the great times that came after that moment, and he picks one out, and I think it kind of leads into the rest of the book. Quote, "The best has to be when he took the whole family to see E.T. in December 1982. Now, if you're listening to this and you ride BMX, you already know what it is. In E.T., there's a very iconic scene of kids riding BMX bikes. And you know what? I kind of wonder, somebody help me out on this, is this the first time the world kind of saw BMX in such a big production? I wonder if that was like the first kind of glimpse into BMX. Let me know. Continuing on. I was transfixed. Nothing had ever looked cooler or appealed to me more. I came out of that cinema with BMX burned into my brain. This is it, boy. Little shit, this is how this shit happens. Just by little moments like that. That's pretty wild. It's weird how BMX it gets some of us as kids. I'd like to figure that out. Why is it that BMX, kind of infected certain kids, but didn't really have the same effect on others? Man, that's big. It seemed like John needed a bike at that point. His dad took him to a shop, and it looked like he had two choices. It was either a Piranha XL or a Diamondback Viper. Now, if it was me, I'd probably roll with that Diamondback. John decided to take the Piranha with those heavy-ass steel wheels. John, we all make mistakes in life, man. It's all good. Just blow it off. John continues on to kind of describe the freedom that comes with BMX. And he says something here that really stood out to me. And if you're listening, try to remember this and relate it to your feelings of BMX. How you feel about it. He said, I can't explain why. It's just something that appeals to every fiber of my being. I felt that shit, man. There's this unexplainable, indescribable obsession that not a lot of people understand. So you don't even attempt to explain it to them. It's not a hobby. It's not a sport. I think it's kind of a way of life, actually. I don't really know how else to explain it. It's just BMX. John continues on about his newfound love for BMX, and he even learned his first trick. Quote, while I was no straight-A student, I'd been doing my BMX homework diligently, and I'd managed to nail my first trick. Most people never forget their first kiss, but for a BMXer, it's the first move they managed to nail to the extent that they could do it whenever the mood takes them. That's big. That's a big moment. Yeah, I never forgot mine. I think I used to do kickouts for a while, but then I think the first big trick I learned was a turn down. And if you remember learning turn downs, it's like, it seems like you spend years getting it to where you get to 90. But then you get that one time where it slips past 90 a little bit, and it instantly clicks for you. It's like, oh, okay, that's how you do it. What was the first trick you ever learned? Hit me up, let me know. Continuing on. In the mid-'80s, John moved from Glasgow to Dundee. With this move, it seems like he was able to kind of put the past behind him and focus on, progressing his life while pursuing BMX. Shortly after the move, John was able to witness some high-level BMX firsthand. With the help from a local skateboarder, John was able to see his first legit ramp. It seemed like it was a 10-foot half-pipe. Quote, it was a fair trek on a BMX with no gears. It's about an hour and 20 minutes each way, and often I did it in the pissing rain. But all the effort was worth it when one day I spotted Scott Carroll there. He was a Scottish and had just won the BMX World Championship for his age group. I didn't know he hung out there and lived locally. And I was in awe as I saw him firing up and down the big ramp. He was the best rider in the world, in front of my very own eyes. Continuing. Quite simply, I wanted to be Scott. The way he carried himself, the way he dressed, the way he looked. It was cool as fuck. He wore a few Swatch watches on each wrist. That's crazy. It's like that's the little shit you don't forget. As a young kid, looking around, looking in the magazines, the videos, the people around you. You go to a stunt show or a contest. You remember little shit like that. I needed to either get myself a Haro or a GT. They were the McCartney and Lennon of the BMX world. Both were top class, and I finally had enough of the piggy bank to afford a serious top-of-the-range bike, so I got my Haro Sport in 1988. Scott looked at me differently the first day I showed up on it, and so did the rest of the boys. I was part of the gang now, no longer just wee wannabe John. At this point in the story, it kind of seems like John is, just kind of living that BMX life. Like after high school, you have a few years where it's really kind of just BMX, I guess, and that's kind of how he's living. But he still wanted more. He wanted to pursue more. Working jobs here and there. He worked at a hotel for a while, which, by the way, when you read the book, you'll be able to kind of read all the stories that he had about working in that hotel. Some of which are pretty awesome. But John wanted more. He wanted more of everything. He wanted more of life. He wanted more of BMX. And in 1995, his life would change yet again. Just as my year was coming to an end, the Australian embassy came good on their promise. My visa had been granted, and I had 3 months to get my arse to the other side of the world. What had only been a dream was now set to become a reality. It's funny, as I sit and narrate this book, what pops in my head is the movie The Never-Ending Story. When he's posted up in the school, it's like an old dusty attic at the school. He's curled up in an old blanket. He's got a little candle lit. Just imagine that's me right now. That's what I'm doing. Anyways, continuing on. Here's John talking about Australia. Quote, "And it was immense. This thing that I had been salivating for. I was doing it and riding topless in the warm air while loving life. What really helped me was that back then the UK and the US were ahead of Australia in terms of BMX. Down under, they didn't have our standard of competition. So when the other riders saw me doing 540 airs and all these other big tricks, they were pretty taken back. And to top it off, I was doing them on this shit-hot, custom-made, top-of-the-range standard bike. Designed for my exact measurements, what they'd only eyed up in a catalog. Standards were top-quality machines, and you didn't see them that often. So it was a case of, who the fuck is this crazy Scotsman? Most people probably wonder why we do it. Why do we risk our bodies to pull off a jump? And it's no joke. The thing is that no matter what happens to us, we wouldn't give it any less on our next jump or trick. We crave that feeling of going for it. In BMX, it's all about commitment and determination. There's no feeling like it. Total mental application to one single thing. Sex, drugs, love. Nothing replicates what it's like for us. You hear people say in a car crash that everything slows down. It's the same for us as we fly through the air. We can see that beautiful sunset like we've been studying it for hours. Or we notice the kid 20 meters away looking with his mouth open, as if we were face to face. It took me a long time to realize that's what the sport is all about. Damn, I like how he touched on determination. That's something that I think we all struggle with as we get older riding BMX. It's like some things we've done before, or even, we think we can still do them, but we hesitate, When I'm talking to other people when they're trying tricks, I just say, look, man, you can do it. Just tell yourself you can. Picture yourself doing it. Act like you've done it 100 times before. But when we internalize that, when we tell that to ourselves, it's much more difficult. But anyways, I'm glad you touched on that, because that's something I've been thinking about recently. Moving on. Little did I know, my roller coaster life was set to hit some stony ground, and most of it would be my fault. Yeah, I've skipped ahead quite a bit, but it's actually still early in John's story, believe it or not. It's about mid to late 2000s at this point, and John actually met a girl and settled down. And as these things often happen, John got married and had a baby. Now, I hate to kind of just gloss over stuff like this, because it's incredibly important, and every little detail is important to somebody's life story. And all these little things kind of play into John's future. As John was settling down, he also was becoming more acquainted with the BMX industry. He was selling bikes, kind of going shop to shop, selling a lot of Hoffman bikes. And he also started working for a company called 666, which I think eventually turned into a company called Forgotten. John invested a lot of his time and energy into this company, and he actually got to the point where he was turning, I think he said, $1.8 million in revenue this one year, and which is fucking huge, But I think the thing about that company is they weren't giving him the effort that he was giving them, if that makes sense. They weren't putting into the company what he was putting in, and it wasn't even really his company. At that point, he did own a small portion of the company, but in the end, it didn't really work out. But that did allow him to even branch out further. So as John continued to broaden his horizons in business, he was also growing a family at home. He actually bought a house, a really fucking nice house from how he explains it. And everything was good, at least for a little while. But again, there are some things in this book that John talks about, which I have chosen not to mention in this podcast, because I think he should be the one to tell you that part of his story. I feel like me kind of giving you those kind of details in this format just really doesn't do his story justice. So I encourage you, go buy the book, and you'll see, the more in-depth side of what he's experienced and what he's gone through. So basically, he had some demons still lurking in his mind from past experiences, and things that if you don't talk to someone, if you don't talk these things out, they can just lurk for years, and they just kind of live under the surface. So these things were starting to come out, and unfortunately they seemed to be affecting John's relationship with his wife. And there was one thing, again, I won't say it, but it kind of led to, I guess, the demise of his marriage, and something that came out and caused John to snap. And he I think he saw a little bit of his dad, his biological father, in him in that moment, and he just reflected on himself for a while, and unfortunately it was the cause of his divorce, and also to lose the relationship with his daughter, unfortunately. And I have a quote here about that. So, with my marriage in tatters, I had to think about the future, and if I'm brutally honest, what was at the forefront of my mind? BMX will save me. That was what. Some people will wince reading this and imagine a man saying that, but I chose my sport over my wife and child, and it kills me to admit that. If you heard the first podcast, I interviewed Michael Laren, and he said, live your life unapologetically. And I've actually thought about that quite a few times while reading this book, and that seems to be what John has done for a long time. He simply lives his life and does what he wants to do, and I fully respect that. I really, truly love when somebody is upfront about their decision making. They're not hiding behind the decision. They just say, this is what the fuck I'm doing. And to add to that, every decision that he did make, I will say, was with passion. In 2009, John started a BMX company called Pilgrim. Once again, it seemed like he needed more from BMX, but he also wanted to be in control and be able to make all the big decisions himself. So he found out a way to just make it happen. My parents, along with some aunts and uncles, lent just over $100,000 to get Pilgrim off the ground. I don't know much about Pilgrim. I've definitely heard of it before, but I was really surprised to hear all the team riders. People like Jed Milden, Vince Byron, and that one dude, Logan Martin. But one thing John noticed was that no matter how good the riders were, that alone didn't necessarily translate to revenue. Quote, "A lot of what makes them great is what they do off the bike. Some guys are super talented, but get carried away and become arrogant, and that's going to bite you in the backside in BMX. For example, our X Games medal success resulted in no increase in sales at Pilgrim. But unfortunately, Pilgrim was kind of short-lived. There was a sales deal that just went wrong. I'll let you read about it. Didn't involve John at all. It involved one of his associates. Basically doubled ordered some bikes. But John, being the man he was, still just didn't want to quit. So he actually got a side job just to be able to pay his riders. Imagine that, a BMX company owner with a freaking side job. Quote, "I remember one time in New Zealand, I'd done a few Leaf Busters jobs." Leaf Busters was the company he worked for as a side job. "I had done a few Leaf Busters jobs there, and I was taking cash out of my wallet and handing it over to Jed being one of the team riders, as he was still my rider. He was one of the few people I trusted, and I told him what's going on. Jed didn't want to take it, but I insisted. I carried on doing that, but things just weren't sustainable. I subconsciously realized that Pilgrim would have to end." Yeah, that's a bummer, man. It's pretty fucking devastating, actually, because you pour your heart and your soul into something, and one shady deal, and it just fucking crumbles, you know? Look, a lot of shit came crashing down at that time. Professionally, emotionally, everything. Quote, "I put my foot hard on the gas, closed my eyes, and just waited for what was coming next. Whether it was smashing into a heavy goods truck or careering off the road, I didn't know. But I wanted it to end there and then. Wake up, Daddy." That's what shocked my brain back to life. I heard my wee Mackenzie, John's daughter, pleading with me, and my eyes sprang open. I was doing 120 kilometers, but I gripped the wheel and slowed down as the tears were streaming down my face. "So Mackenzie, thank you. You saved your old man, even though you didn't know it." So many ups and downs in John's life. But at this point, it seemed like he was down as far as he could possibly go. But I mean, you can only go up, right? Then, not long afterwards, the most amazing thing happened that hit me like a bolt from the blue, and I was back on top of my game. It was a zero to hero moment as my world just spun on its axis and my blood was pumping again. I'll never forget it. My phone burst into action. It was my old colleague. Initially, when I saw the caller ID, I sort of panicked, as I thought maybe he'd heard about Pilgrim's struggles and was on to offer some words of consolation, which would have made me feel even worse. But he just said, "John, your dream job has come up." John got a job offer from Haro Bikes. Well, it wasn't really an offer. It was just a job opening that he was told about. But John being John, he fucking went all in. As a matter of fact, the job was actually kind of reserved for an American, a U.S. citizen. John, being from Scotland and living in Australia, unfortunately didn't, have that qualification. But hey, sometimes you just gotta make shit happen. I like that about this story, and actually about this, specific circumstance here, is that John was told no a bunch of times, and look, sometimes you just gotta take shit into your own hands, As a matter of fact, like I think I do well when people tell me no. I don't back down from shit, and I feel like I've related to John a lot throughout this story. A lot of the things he says, I heard it, I felt it, because I relate to a lot of what he was saying. So everybody listening out there, just, don't back down from shit. You're going to get a lot of no's in life, but sometimes you just got to persevere and keep pushing. The process to get the job at Haro was actually pretty rough. As you'll hear shortly, I actually had the opportunity to interview John, and he talks about that process and what he had to go through and the amount of money he had to spend traveling to the U.S. to do it. And of course, there's no regrets behind that. You got to do what you got to do. And basically, he just made it happen, And, this was about 2012. And if you can remember, Haro was at a point where it was kind of flat. They didn't stand out. Kind of seemed like they lost their soul a little bit. But with John's extensive knowledge about BMX and Haro specifically, and just his perseverance and, willingness to keep pushing, he was able to revive it a little bit. Here's an example from the book. I started a website called The Generations of Freestyle, which was dedicated to the history of BMX, not just Haro, showing off all the old bikes and stories. I had cartoons on there and drawings. It was a labor of love, and I just ran out of time to devote to it, so I abandoned it. But I told Joe about it, Joe being Joe Hawk of Haro Bikes, and he wanted me to bring the idea to Vegas. So I liaised with the guys designing the show all week out there, and they built a really impressive stand, coming from me describing what I'd pictured in my head. When I arrived in the hall, I was gobsmacked, and Mark Losey, who built it up, did a fantastic job of making this idea I'd come up with a reality. It was exactly what I had dreamed of, a living and breathing BMX museum, covering all the ages, and Joe had agreed with me to include other brands, not just Haro. Heroes of mine like Eddie Fiola and Mike Dominguez, who I had a poster of on my wall from their visit to Livingston Skate Park in Scotland way back in 1992, handed over one of their bikes to feature. The stand had all sorts of models and colors, and topping it off literally was Woody Itzon's 24-karat gold-plated BMX, which glistened and shone brightly on top. I couldn't have wanted the idea in my brain to come to life any better. And look, this is just this is an example of what John brought to the table at Haro, just this creativity, this soul, this passion. I don't think Haro had seen that for a while. I think they were pretty blown away. And not to mention all these retro bikes that John has created since then, the Lineage lines. If you are unfamiliar with those, go check them out. Just go look up Haro Lineage, Haro Retro. You got the Sport, the Master. There's an incredible amount of detail and history put into these bikes. And so after an extensive interview process, John was pretty much a shoo-in for the job. Haro saw his passion, his motivation, and how could they say no? But one thing that was weighing on John's mind was the fact that he had to move to the U.S. In other words, he had to move away from the people he loved. I sat down with my parents and I told them it was all ready and I'd be going. They understood what a big deal it was for me, as with us having such a good relationship. They knew what Haro meant to me and how BMX had become my life since I was a teenager. They remembered me going to the bakery or working extra hours in the hotel to buy brake cables from America, and my dad really gushed about how he was so proud of me that I'd followed my dream. He let slip that if he had the choice to do it all again, he'd be a professional cricket player, as that was his teenage dream. Damn, that's big. That's some, those are some words of encouragement for sure. I mean, how can you not be psyched to hear something like that coming from your dad? John's gone on to do great things for Haro and for BMX. Quote, "It might not be for everyone, but I will argue with anyone until I'm blue in the face that BMX is a fun, exciting, and challenging sport that cuts across gender and ethnic differences." Again, there's that passion, there's that drive, that ambition, that perseverance. Something he's developed, through his whole life. Starting off as a homeless kid, digging through trash cans looking for food, all the way up until he's a brand manager for Haro Bikes. He's the dude. He's the design dude. He's the one that's making stuff happen. And also you'll hear in this upcoming interview with John, this story, this book, is actually being made into a movie. And he'll give you some details on that, and I'm pretty excited to see it. And I hope you get a chance to read this book and eventually see the movie. Here's some words from the man himself. From digging through dumpsters to, the motherfucking big screen, man. Mr. John Buultjens. John Buultjens, how you doing, sir?
Good, Casey, good. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thank you so much for actually just giving me this opportunity to cover your story. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the book, and I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more from you. You came from probably the most humble of beginnings, and you've gone through some crazy ups and downs in your life, extreme highs, extreme lows. How do you think those moments in your life have affected the person you are today as far as work ethic and your perseverance and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's a tough one. When I think of my childhood and everything, where I came from, it just makes me more determined. And I mean, I've said a few times to people that I had 99 no's for every one yes. So that's the one thing in life. I mean, just because someone says no to you, there's nothing wrong with you. It's not personal, but if you keep striving, you will achieve. Never give up. And that was the one thing I learned. I mean, I was homeless at 5 years old. I was living on the streets, eating out of trash cans. So to be able to look back at that and then see where I am now, like brand manager for Haro Bikes in Southern California, that doesn't just get given to you. Katie, you said you read my book, so everything, what it took for me to take this job on. And I sacrificed everything I had, spent the last of my savings, lost my house, everything. But you got to be in it to win it, don't you?
Yeah, that's a good point that you made, because I was talking to Michael recently, Michael Laren. I'm sure you probably know who he is.
Yeah, we've had some good talks.
Good, yeah, and I believe he's probably a fairly like-minded individual, and he had mentioned something about living your life unapologetically, and that's something I've been thinking about a lot. And reading your book, it kind of stuck out too, and it seems like you're the type of guy who makes you make big decisions, and you're not afraid to simply choose one way or the other. You're not afraid to make these hard decisions. And again, going back to your childhood, I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but the tough times you went through as a kid kind of led you to be able to make these decisions because you were faced with such, adversity at such a young age.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm not scared. And I think that's what happens as well with BMX. You have to live in the moment. You have to be here now. If you're thinking of the past, you'll crash. You have to think of where you're going, where your front tire's landing, where your back tire's landing. And if you're not concentrating on the moment, you'll crash. And it's the same in life. If you're not concentrating on what you're doing right now, you're going to crash in life as well. You're going to crash in your relationship. So I always have that parallel reference to riding a bike. You know, be here right now, and everything will be amazing.
Right. I also kind of wanted to talk very briefly about you coming to Haro and what that process was like for you. I imagine it was an incredible amount of excitement for you, and just, you know, the people listening right now, they've heard for the most part your story of getting to Haro, but I wanted to know from you emotionally how that process went.
Yeah, it was, I mean, Haro to me was BMX, especially freestyle BMX. So when this position came up, Alan Cook had just resigned, and I got a phone call saying, John, your dream position has come up. And I'm like, what dream position? And they said, Haro brand manager in California. And I'm like, oh, shit. So at that time, I had my own company, Pilgrim. And, I mean, we were doing well. I mean, I had people like, Logan Martin was riding for me.
I read that.
I mean,
that's wild. How old was he at the time anyways?
Wow, I think Logan came onto the team about 17 or 18. I mean, Jay Tui, another one, he was like 15 or 16. I've known Jay since he was 13. Jed Milden did the first triple backflip on a Pilgrim. Had amazing athletes, Adam Eloise over here, Dane Searles, who sadly passed away after backflipping 60 feet. Didn't die in the crash, but it was actually afterwards, sadly, celebrating. I mean, I had so many amazing athletes on Pilgrim, but I was I'd spent so much on my athletes and not enough on my marketing and I got stuck with a double shipment, which was a extra cost of $165,000, and I couldn't come up with the payment, so I pretty much had to close the company. I paid to close my company, so it cost me $165,000 to close Pilgrim, but I was all in. I was like, this is my position at Haro. So even though I was told I wouldn't get the job at Haro because they wanted to find an American to do this, I was on the phone with Joe Hawk, the president of Haro, and I said, look, will you at least interview me? Will you let me come over and just meet? So he said, okay, if you want to waste your money. And so I spent the last $2,800 I had to come over to California from Melbourne, Australia. And I flew across here, and my interview was supposed to be 1 hour. My interview actually lasted 2.5 days. So it was pretty crazy, And by the end of the interview, I mean, we did amazing things. We even went up to Vans and caught up with Jerry Badders, and we were working on, Haro and Vans were working on the Haro collab shoe. And so I went up there just to check the shoes out and added a few things myself, saying maybe if we do this or that. And Jerry's like, are you in an interview? So it was pretty funny. But by the end of it, I flew over only for 5 days, and with 2.5 days later, I asked Joe Hawk. I said, look, you know, am I what you're looking for? And he said a whole lot more. He said, I'll fight to get you here. So it's difficult. I don't have a degree. I don't have a diploma. Well, I have a diploma, but it's hotel business management. But it's so difficult to come into America from Australia or Scotland because you have to prove you're not taking anyone's job. And my sponsors had to prove that I could do something that no one could. And it all came from passion and love. And I was that kid in the candy store. And I wanted to create that again in Haro, because the one thing I said in my interview that Joe always remembered was, Haro just needs to be Haro. Stop trying to be everyone else. Be who you are as a human being. Be who you are as a brand. And people like Moeller and Ronnie Bonner, you know, I've had so many, Robbie, like so many people come up to me and go, wow, you've made Haro again. And to hear that from your peers and your direct competition is a compliment. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps right now. Because, at one point they all had a Haro, and they see Haro's back, and that gives me a little flutter. Even when you get Bob Haro giving you a compliment, it's pretty amazing.
So do you think, you know, when Joe Hawk said that to you, do you think that he, I guess just after meeting you and interviewing you, do you think he maybe realized that Haro had gone down a path of kind of like mediocrity a little bit, to where they got a little stagnant, and then he met you and thought maybe you could revive the brand a little bit?
Yeah, exactly. That was it. He loved the fact that I didn't come in here for an interview knowing all the product they had. I came in saying how we could fix what needed fixing.
Right.
Personalizing the bikes. I mean, I am a strong believer that, you know, I think we should own the bike. We should own the stem. We should own the crank. We should own, you know, our grip molds, tire molds. Like, I mean, in Pilgrim, I couldn't afford to open all these molds. But at Haro, we're doing the volumes, so we can definitely open them. So when I got here and we're still using generic parts on our bikes, I'm like, come on, dude, we're Haro. So every year we add more and more onto the bike, and obviously open tooling and mold fees and everything else. But it makes it more personal. And I wanted that from the $250 bike right up to the $1,500 lineage. Each bike is personal to that kid. You know, some parents can only afford $250. That's a lot of money for a budget. So I wanted that $250 to feel that's the best $250 you could spend on a bike by making them more personal. And so that's where it all came from. Yeah, I'm grabbing on.
that's proof of your passion right there. Actually caring what the person is going to, you know, the product and what people are going to spend their money on is huge.
I want the emotional connection.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. You had briefly mentioned in your book toward the end that once you get into cruise control, you don't do well. So with that said, as you know, in your life, nothing lasts forever.
Yeah.
What's next for you? I know you said that, you know, you'll continue to ride BMX, but what I was looking for, which you didn't really elaborate on it too much in the book, but professionally, what's next for you?
Casey, what really my heart is pulling towards is working with foster and adoption. I'll always ride a bike. I would love to be more an ambassador for Haro than be the brand manager in the office every single day and running the day-to-day things. But working with foster and adoption, inspiring just one child a day that, you know, for many years I felt rejected and abandoned and I wasn't good enough. But with foster and adoption, I mean, my message is you're the chosen one. You know, it's more powerful to be chosen than rejected and abandoned. And so I want to spread that love and that word out there that you are the most amazing human being on this planet. And you're perfect the way you are. We're always looking at ourselves going, what's wrong? Look in the mirror and acknowledge yourself and say what's right. Because 98% of who you are is perfect right now.
Right. And also
so don't concentrate on the 2%.
Right. And to add to that, I hear people saying that quite a bit, and I think about, like, okay, you know, 20 years from now, you're going to look back at the age you are now, and you're going to wish that you were this age. So don't take anything for granted and appreciate the person that you are. But yeah, that's a good answer. I really appreciate that.
That's what I love the bike industry. My best friends are in the bike industry. I mean, one of my closest friends, Grant Smith, owns BSD, and I've known him for 30 plus years. And seeing your friends thrive, do so well, I mean, that's what gets me off. Like,
and just seeing their ideas, you know, creativity come out too.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny when you're working in Asia, like China and Taiwan and stuff, and they find it strange that we're friends. You're friends with your competition. They find it so strange, and it's like, I mean, it's not like anyone's my enemy in BMX, but keep your enemies closer. But they're my friends.
That's a good point. And I've always had a side of me that appreciated competitiveness in BMX, and that's another episode that I'm going to cover in probably the next few episodes, is just competitiveness in BMX. I think there's definitely a place for it, and you know, business aside, I just mean BMX in general, competition with riding. But yeah, do you feel we don't need to touch on this too much, but competitiveness? How do you think about competitiveness in freestyle BMX?
And so actual riding, not in the industry?
Yeah, just riding.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I'm all about originality, and I just feel right now I hate even using the word, but there's just so many clones. And I love, like, back in the day, Wilkerson had his own style. DMC had his own style. Right. I mean, Hoffman, geez, like, no one could come near him. But then you go into the mid-school era, like Jay Miron, who's actually making me a coffee table right now, if I may say so. Jay's making me a new coffee table for my house. Dave Mira, like, you go through all those amazing legends, they stand out. And Logan Martin went off and did his thing, and I see a lot of people riding very similar to that kind of riding style. And I'm not saying people are copying Logan, it's just that's where riding is now. And my feeling, just mine, is today it's almost unrelatable. I mean, so unrelatable. You don't know if someone's doing a flare, bar, tail whip, or down whip, or is it a cork 5, or is it a 900? And kids are getting confused. So that's why I'm a fan of yours, Casey. I mean, you make BMX look cool and look approachable and appealing. You know, it's fun.
Thank you.
And that's what it's about. It's the competition is in yourself. You shouldn't be competing with all these others going out there. It's competing with yourself, and that's the way I see it. But again, it's just my opinion.
Excellent, man. No, that's a good answer. I only have 2 more questions for you. The first one is the easy one. What's your favorite bike of all time?
My 88 Sport, that's just rebuilt. My 2018 Sport Lineage model. That took, I guess you read the book. So, that was the first bike. My parents actually gave me a loan, my new parents. They gave me a loan to buy my first Haro Sport. And so I worked in a paper route. I worked in a bakery. I started work at 4 a.m. Took 6 months to pay off was it 3 months? God, it's 32 years ago. But I paid, that was my first loan I ever took out, and I took it out from my parents. My parents bought my Haro Sport from the States in 88, and that was the first piece that I worked towards. I worked for it. I owned every little piece of it. I wasn't given it. And so I guess that's what it means to me that, I mean, in life today, I've never paid interest on a credit card because I work for it. I won't buy anything unless I can afford it. And it all came from saving up to buy that first Haro Sport. So, and it's sitting right in front of me. I'm in the Haro office right now, and I've got it hanging on my wall, the black, blue, chrome 88 Sport.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate that answer. However, the 91 Sport would just destroy any other Haro ever made. Last question. I want to talk about this movie real quick. Do you have any details about it?
Okay, I have a Zoom meeting in 55 minutes with Chris Bridges, with his managers, with Roadside Attractions, Forest Films. So right now, it's still locked in for July 31st. Now, people are like, the cinema's going to be open. Well, if you look, Disney has Mulan coming out on the 24th of July. Tenet, have you heard of Tenet? Okay, Tenet, $205 million budget. That comes out on the 17th of July. Russell Crowe has a new movie coming out. So cinemas will be open in July.
Excellent.
We, at the moment, this Zoom meeting is about, do we go digital or do we go cinema? A few people on the board are scared, enticing people to go back to the cinema in case of COVID and everything else. But I think right now our message is more relevant and more powerful than it has ever been. I mean, if I can say, this is the perfect storm. We've just come through COVID. Everything's been shut down. There's a race war going on across the world, not just in America. And our movie is about racism. It's about domestic violence. It's about personal struggle. But it's about hope. It's belief. It's you can be anything you want to be in life. And Chris Bridges plays my adoptive father. And yes, I was a little racist growing up. So it's about white supremacy. But it's about love. You can get over the past by living in the present moment. I hated my dad the first time I went to live with him because he was black. My dad is the most amazing father, and he's been so supportive now. He's been my dad for 38 years, and I've got tears in my eyes just talking about him.
Yeah, he sounds great. He really does.
So, hopefully the movie will be out July 31st. That's what we're at right now.
Excellent.
Well, John,
dude, look, man, I've wanted to talk to you for a long time, and I just appreciate you just allowing me to share this story with people. Like I said, I didn't share every detail because there were a lot of things in the book that I felt people should probably read for themselves, or really you should give them that information. I shouldn't have been the one to kind of regurgitate that story for you, but hopefully that'll encourage people to go buy the book. And I really enjoyed reading it. There was an insane amount of information packed into those 200 some odd pages. So it was awesome.
Thank you.
Man. I really appreciate this.
I appreciate you spending the time reading it as well, mate.
Yeah, of course.
thank you so much for your support, and hope to get to ride with you soon.
Yeah, hopefully, man. Best of luck and take care. All right.
Thanks, brother. You take care.
All right.
Thanks, Casey.
All right. Later. Bye.
Bye.
Well, there you have it. The man himself. If you want to reach out to John, maybe ask him some questions, hit him up on Instagram. His Instagram is at John Buultjens. JohnBuultjens. Again, that's JohnBuultjens. John Buultjens. It was an honor and a privilege to be able to cover this story. And in closing, I just want to say to everybody listening out there, everybody goes through something. Everybody struggles. If you got something you're dealing with and you need to talk to somebody, hit me up. I'm always here to listen. Look, I talk a lot of shit online, but it's all out of love. So you got something you want to talk about, I'm always here. Alright? I'll throw you my phone number, whatever I got to do. Just hit me up. Until next time, Shitsonian, out.